Everybody, and welcome back to Video Game Esoterica. On this week's episode, we have IMSA Racing, one of the only console native M2 games to leak. This is developed in-house by Studio 3DO, and you're kind of getting a look at a little bit of the boot sequence of the M2 right now. You get this please insert disc flashing, and you will see the Studio 3DO logo is going to come up right now. Studio 3DO was the in-house development team for the 3DO company. They produced Killing Time as well as Battlesport for the original 3DO, and IMSA Racing was one that was going to come out for launch for the M2. The copyrights between 95 and 97, so that was kind of the overall time frame. You get this pretty interesting, very looking mid-90s sort of FMV intro here, showing the overall IMSA Racing format. Really not familiar with IMSA Racing as far as like a format of racing is concerned. I know NASCAR, Formula One, although I don't really watch either of them. But I'll go ahead and let you guys watch the intro. Not a lot to talk about, just mid-90s glory. Oh, that guy spun out there. But enjoy the intro, and we'll be back with some of the gameplay and talk about the only console M2 game that ever leaked that you can play through to the end. So enjoy. Alright, so I'm back with the main menu of IMSA Racing. You have some configuration options as well as game options. Controlling this game is quite difficult. It was designed for an analog pad. There is one that exists in a collector's possession, but I certainly don't have it. You get a little look at what the prototype looked like on the right hand side of the screen, although the controller that exists actually has that sort of rotary circular wheel on the left that actually exists in the bottom of the controller. Definitely looks like a Nintendo 64 controller, can't deny that. And unfortunately, because I don't have a prototype controller for the M2 kiosk, I'm not able to change the view of the car. So everything is done from the cockpit. You can't get that third-person look. Otherwise, put damage to cars on, you get a little damage. And the configure race menu is where you're going to go ahead and select what's going on in the race. You can select your number of laps, you can choose your track, you can decide if you want to race against other cars or yourself. You can do race conditions. The only thing that exists is daytime or fog. There isn't anything else built in. I'm assuming there was some intent to have that included, but they just didn't get that done in this beta. It's pretty close to completion. Yeah, you get to look at some of the 3D models that do come with the game. Obviously, you don't really see many of these during the race, but they did spend a lot of time kind of producing these high polygon models for you. You can see the tire here. Definitely looks round. There's not really many angles on it, so it did show kind of the overall polygon pushing power of the 3DO M2. Some of these, I think, change the handling of the vehicle, but honestly, I don't know if everything is enabled in this beta because a lot of the options you change around don't really seem to have much of a function within the game itself. But overall, that's kind of just the menu system. I'm going to go ahead and select the different courses here. There are some placeholder graphics in here where you'll see a space alien that says placeholder. I'm not sure what that was intended for, if it was just kind of like an in-joke or if that was a different game in development they made something for and used it as a placeholder. But go ahead, check out the menus. Pretty basic, but it is fun to look at. You get these little course overviews down here. But I'll be back with the first race. Alright, so here we go with the first race in IMSA Racing. I actually win this one. I don't know how. This course is basically just an oval, basic NASCAR style setup. Definitely very hard to control the game. Like I said, without that analog pad, it's almost impossible to do very well. You kind of, as opposed to actually using the directional pad on a 3DO controller, you kind of just tap it and hope for the best. But you get a look at the overall graphical power of the M2 as far as the home console release is concerned. You see kind of the texture work on all those billboards is very clear, it's readable. It does change quality from low resolution to high resolution as you're getting closer to it, but that was kind of standard to have that sort of filtering done to textures so you could actually have them look better as they got up close. Rolled off the raceway there. But you get a sense of the power of the M2. This isn't the most impressive track in the game. That would actually be the New Orleans level. I'm not sure if this was a finalized graphical design or if this is still a work in progress, because while it is technically impressive, it isn't super exciting to look at. The cars in the rear view, you can see everything going on in real time, so it's definitely pushing a lot of power around. The opponent cars are pretty high polygon, although they somehow seem to look a little pre-rendered as they drive by. There's something about the way they move that makes me wonder if it really is a real-time model or if it's something that's pre-rendered and then placed in at different angles. There's just something about the movement of the vehicles, that staccato nature of how they move. Maybe it's refreshing at a lower frame rate to be able to achieve that sort of look, but it's just a question I have, and I got totally spun around and flipped there. I still come back and win the race, though. And there you go, you gotta look at that model. Like, I think it is real-time polygon, but it's just, there's something about it that looks a little bit different to me. But go ahead and enjoy this. There's the last lap. There's a really funny FMV "You Win" sequence, which I swear looks like it was shot probably in the parking lot of the 3DO company. You could definitely tell it's probably just 3 developers they pulled out of the office, threw some racing gear and helmets on, and kind of just shot it, compared to the intro FMV, which is definitely real footage of racing. This is definitely something that they just did in their spare time. So check that out, and I'll be back with the next course, and you will see me absolutely not get first place on that one. But we'll be back in a minute. And there you go, I got first place here. There is a name entry screen, although the kiosk doesn't really have any way to save files. Obviously the console would have had a memory card. The FC21S1 does have a space to insert a memory card, so you would be able to save that obviously on a home console had it released, but unfortunately with the kiosk there really isn't any saved function. So now we're going to go to Laguna Seca. Not exactly sure if I'm pronouncing the second part right, but we'll go with it. I decided to race in the fog. Kind of interesting to look at. Definitely do not do very well in this race. It seems that the cars are more difficult to control depending on what racetrack you're on. I'm not sure if different, control styles were enabled or disabled depending on the course, but this one is definitely not a first place finish. I paused it there apparently. I think I was trying to see if I could get out of the cockpit view, but unfortunately, without that prototype controller, it is just impossible to get the exterior view. Get stuck behind that car there. I'm not sure what happened. That seems a little bit glitchy. But the fog effect is pretty good. I mean, it reduces the draw distance. Doesn't really change much as far as frame rate's concerned, but the frame rate is pretty close to a locked 60 frames per second. Those cones there are fully polygonal. You can hit them, and there are some physics effects as to how they bounce. So there's definitely some touches within the game that they tried a little bit harder at. You can see that compared to the Konami M2 games, these were definitely had a little bit more thought and care put into them. Try to turn off some of the maps here just to get a look at the overall course. You have like a radar of where your opponent cars are next to you. You have a rear view camera, and then you have a course map with all the different cars placed on it. That was not a good turn. But this is the second course. I mean, there's not a lot to say. Of all the games that could have still existed and leaked for the console, I kind of wish that it wasn't a racing game. It's kind of a lesser favorite genre of mine, and while it is impressive to look at, it's really 15-20 minutes worth of playtime and you've seen everything that this game has. I'm sure that when they, continue to develop it, have the M2 come out as a home console, you would have had a lot more features in the game. But as it is now, you get 4 tracks, multiple cars, multiple model configurations. But because, there is only one analog controller for the M2 known to exist, controlling this game becomes kind of the actual game itself. Is just trying to keep your car on the track. But enjoy the rest of this racetrack. I'm going to do some commentary for the next 2, but I don't really have about 40 minutes worth of something to say about this game. So we'll come back with the next race and talk about that course.
Last lap. The new Laguna Seca race.
All right, and we're back. We're going to be taking a look at the New Orleans race course. Graphically, this is the most impressive one in the game to me. I think it was probably the furthest along in development, because compared to all the other courses, there's a lot more models in the background, a lot more polygons being pushed around. Just overall shows a lot more of the power of the M2 than the rest of the levels, I feel. Unfortunately, it is also the most difficult course to control your car on. I'm not sure why that is, but I mean, obviously you saw in the first course, I got first place. Here, I can barely even complete a turn without sliding the car out just all around the course. So, if you look in the background, that bridge there is fully polygonal. It's not a sprite effect as far as my eyes can tell, so they are using polygons pretty much in the entire course to kind of set the scenery. When you go through downtown, you get a lot of different buildings. You get a nice Macy's billboard there. I paused it here, and I do not remember why. Let's wait and see what I was doing. Guess I was just pausing it. Get that nice Macy's billboard. Get me crashing into a wall here. But you get that pedestrian bridge, fully polygonal. This course definitely shows more of what the M2 is capable of, and this was going to be a launch game, so you would expect to get even better performance as time went on. But this definitely shows that the M2 was capable of doing things that, as a first-generation launch title, were on par or slightly better than kind of like the final generation of releases for PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, and Nintendo 64. There is a racing game for Nintendo 64, World Championship Racing, that's considered one of the most powerful and kind of graphically impressive games for the Nintendo 64 that I will be showing alongside of this in the last video of the series, which is basically how impressive was the M2, would it have succeeded if it was released? And it's a really good comparison to see that what the Nintendo 64 could have done in some of its final games is something that the M2 could match in a beta game that would have been a launch title. But enjoy the rest of New Orleans. It is a pretty short course. You kind of go around the New Orleans Saints Dome Arena and throughout the streets. I've been to New Orleans a bunch of times. I can't say that this looks very faithful of a recreation, but that is the New Orleans course. Enjoy the rest of it, and we'll be back soon.
Last lap. Renowned for its two-level designs.
All right, so we're back with Suzuka, and this intro here is pretty interesting. It's showing all of the real-time lighting effects on the car, high polygon model, and you get those real-time lights that actually reflect and react to the different colors they're hitting. The green, the red on the floor are real-time light sources, and that's definitely something that the M2 was capable of that other consoles of the generation weren't. So it's just kind of a little showpiece. This course, decently fun. I guess the thing about IMSA Racing is that I wonder had it come out, how the reviews would have been. I'm sure as far as like the impressive nature and the graphics of the game are concerned would have gotten high marks, but as an actual racing game, it's not really an arcade racer, it's not really a simulation game, it's kind of in between, and considering the only reason I even know that this race league exists is because of this game, I don't know how popular it would have been when it came out. It's an interesting game to launch a platform on. I mean, obviously, 3DO didn't have that many franchises known for the original console. You had Gex was kind of like the mascot of the system, so I wonder if maybe Gex Enter the Gecko or Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko would have been, designed for the M2 versus PlayStation 1 had this console gone into production. Never really heard much information about there being a lot of plans for another Gex game, but you would have thought that, 3DO would have wanted to launch with something like that versus a game like this. But hey, I'm not the developers and I didn't work at 3DO, so I'm sure they had their reasons. But yeah, there really isn't much more to say. This is IMSA Racing. Go ahead and continue to watch this playthrough. There's probably still another 17 minutes worth of content to check out. I do some replays where you can see the out of the cockpit view. But that's it. This is the most fully developed home console release that was slated. Obviously, the Konami games are all full featured games because they did release in arcades, but this is the closest look of something that you're going to get for the home console. So enjoy it. I'm really glad I was able to bring this to you. Unfortunately, you do have to have an FC35S or an FC21S1 kiosk to be able to play this game. They are not cheap. They are not readily available. It took me a very long time to find somebody willing to part with one of theirs so I could add it to my collection. Do I recommend you go out and look for one to play this game? No, I don't. There's a couple more bits of software for the kiosk that I don't have that I'm working on obtaining that might make acquiring one a little bit more of an attractive proposition, but unless you're a super enthusiast of 3DO or you were trying to develop a series of YouTube videos showing off rare and esoteric games and hardware, I would not be in much of a hurry to add this to your gaming collection. I mean, it's a great conversation piece. It's really fun to be able to hold an unreleased console in your hands and know that an idea that didn't come to fruition in the home market that you were super looking forward to coming out in 97 did exist. It's something you can buy, hold, and play some games on. But unless you were like me and super excited for the M2 to come out in 96, 97, I would probably suggest you just keep your money and do something different with it. I'm not upset that I got it, but your mileage definitely will vary, pun intended, because this is a race car game with mileage. You might buy it and regret it, but enjoy the rest of the playthrough. This is IMSA Racing. It's supposed to come out in 97 by Studio 3DO. Otherwise, we have even more M2 content for you next week. But please hit the like button, subscribe if you can. We're trying to get as big of an audience as possible for Season 2. You can check us out at Instagram at Chicago Game Collector. But enjoy the rest of this playthrough, and we'll see you guys next week for more M2 content. Thanks, guys.
Last lap.
Located deep in the heart of
Green flag, green flag.
scream down the streets of New Orleans.